The message arrived on every human screen, across 12,000 star systems, at exactly the same moment. Admiral Kandeho was drinking his morning coffee in the command center of Terra Prime Station when the transmission began. The face that appeared was not human. Tarvek, Supreme Commander of the Velthari Empire, stared out from the screen with 4 eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. Humans of Earth and her colonies. Tarvek's voice boomed through translation software. 6,000 years ago, we found your species crawling out of your home system. We chose mercy. We placed you under quarantine, allowing you to exist in your small corner of space. You were primitive, weak, not worth the effort of conquest. Deho set down his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair. Around him, junior officers glanced nervously at each other, but he noticed that Park Minji, his chief diplomatic officer, was smiling slightly. She caught his eye and gave the smallest shrug. That mercy ends today, Tarvek continued. You have expanded beyond your quarantine zone. You have touched worlds we consider ours by right of galactic authority. The Velthari Empire, spanning 40,000 worlds and 500 species, hereby declares war upon humanity. You have one standard cycle to surrender. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your colonies, followed by the occupation of Earth itself. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center for perhaps 3 seconds. Then someone in the back started laughing. It was Choi Junho, the military strategist who had been reviewing supply reports. The laughter was quiet at first, but it spread. Soon, half the command center was chuckling. Sir? A young ensign looked confused. They just declared war on us. Shouldn't we be worried? Deho stood and walked to the viewing window that overlooked the massive orbital defense platforms surrounding Earth. Thousands of ships moved in carefully choreographed patterns. And beyond them, the shimmer of defensive shields created an aurora effect in the upper atmosphere. Li Yuna, Deho called out. The head of human intelligence approached, her datapad already glowing with information. What do we know about their current fleet strength? Same as it was 200 years ago, sir, Yuna replied. They haven't updated their ship designs in 3,000 years. They rely on technology stolen or inherited from conquered species. Their weapons are plasma-based, effective against conventional shields, but nothing we can't handle. And their intelligence on us? Outdated by at least 5 millennia, sir. Their last real surveillance of human space was before we developed gravity manipulation technology. They think we're still using chemical rockets and nuclear fission. Park Minji stepped forward, her diplomatic robes flowing around her. Admiral, I recommend we send a response. Something simple. Deho nodded. Draft it. 10 minutes later, a message beamed back toward Velthari space. It was brief. We acknowledge your declaration of war. This is unfortunate. You have 72 hours to reconsider your decision. After that period, we will assume you understand the consequences and will respond accordingly. Admiral Kang Deho, Terran Defense Fleet. Tarvek received the message 4 hours later due to the distance between their respective territories. He read it 3 times, his confusion growing with each reading. Where was the panic? Where was the desperate plea for negotiation? Where was the fear? Get me the intelligence reports on human capabilities, he ordered his subordinates. Everything. I want to know what we're facing. The reports that arrived painted a picture that made no sense. Humans controlled 12,000 star systems. That was impossible. The quarantine zone was supposed to limit them to a few hundred systems at most. How had they expanded so far? They terraformed dead worlds, Ralthan, his war prince, explained. The worlds we considered worthless, too cold or too hot with toxic atmospheres or no atmospheres at all. They transformed them into living planets. We have footage from long-range probes. The footage showed a barren rock orbiting a dim red star. Then, over the span of what appeared to be a few months, atmosphere generators appeared. Oceans formed. Forests grew. Cities rose. A dead world became a garden. How long did this take? Tarvik asked. 6 months, Supreme Commander. Impossible. Terraforming takes centuries, even with the best technology. Not for humans, apparently. Tarvik felt the first tickle of doubt in his mind. It had been 6,000 years since they had last paid attention to humanity. 6,000 years since they had trapped these primitive creatures behind an invisible fence and forgotten about them. What had the humans been doing during all that time? Back on Terra Prime Station, Daeho called a meeting of the Defense Council. Choi Junho spread a holographic map of known space across the table. Human territory glowed blue. Velthari territory glowed red. They didn't overlap, but they were close in several sectors. They're going to hit our outer colonies first, Junho said. Standard Empire tactics. Crush the weak points, instill fear, force surrender. Let them come, said Bei Jisu, governor of the Mars Nexus colonies. We've been ready for this for 2,000 years. It was true. Every human child learned about the Velthari in school. Every colony had defense plans. Every citizen knew what to do if war came. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because humans had learned something important during their 6,000 years of isolation. They had learned patience. They had learned to prepare. They had learned that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. When they come, Daeho said quietly, they're going to learn what 6,000 years of human innovation looks like. I almost feel sorry for them. Park Minji smiled. Almost, she agreed. Tarvik stood in the intelligence chamber of his flagship, staring at the data streams flowing across dozens of screens. Every report made less sense than the last one. His intelligence officers worked frantically, updating their databases with current information about humanity. What they found was disturbing. Supreme Commander, one officer said nervously. The humans have military installations in 9,000 of their 12,000 systems. Every single colony has defensive capabilities that match or exceed our forward military bases. That's impossible, Tarvik replied. They were primitives. Show me their expansion timeline. The holographic display changed, showing human space growing year by year. It started small, just a few systems around their home world. Then it grew steadily, not through conquest, but through settlement. They moved into systems no one else wanted. Dead systems. Systems with dying stars or frozen rocks. Systems the Velthari Empire had surveyed and dismissed as worthless. But humans didn't see worthless worlds. They saw opportunities. Han Taiyang, head of human military development, sat in his office on Luna Base, reviewing the Velthari fleet movements. His team had been tracking them for decades. Centuries, actually. Every ship movement, every communication, every supply route. The Velthari had no idea they were being watched. They're moving their third fleet toward the Outer Rim colonies, his assistant said. Should we alert the governors? They already know, Taiyang replied. We've been running simulations of this exact scenario for 1,000 years. Every colony governor has fought this battle 100 times in training. Let the Velthari come. They'll learn. On Mars Nexus, Governor Bei Jisu was having lunch with her daughter when the alert came through. The Velthari fleet was 2 days away. She calmly finished her meal, kissed her daughter on the forehead, and walked to the command center. Status? She asked. All defensive systems online. Civilian evacuation protocols ready. But Governor, the civilians are refusing to evacuate. Jizu raised an eyebrow. Refusing? They say they want to watch. They say they've been preparing for this their whole lives, and they're not going to miss it. Jishu laughed. It was true. Every human had grown up with stories of the Velthari. Every child had played strategy games based on potential battles. Every student had studied alien psychology and military tactics. This wasn't panic time. This was game time. In Velthari space, Ralthan reviewed the attack plan. Mars Nexus was a mid-sized colony, home to about 50 million humans. It had mining operations and agricultural facilities. Intelligence said it was defended by a small orbital defense grid. Easy target. They would crush it quickly, broadcast the footage, and watch humanity crumble in fear. "Sir, we're getting strange readings from the target system," his sensor officer reported. "What kind of readings?" "Energy signatures we don't recognize. Mass readings that don't match our intelligence reports. It's like there are structures there that weren't there a month ago. Impossible. Nothing can be built that fast. It's probably sensor errors. Proceed with the attack." The Velthari fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Mars Nexus system. 300 warships, each massive and bristling with weapons. Enough firepower to crack a planet. They began their approach, expecting to see panicked evacuation ships fleeing. Instead, they saw nothing. The colony lights were still on. Ships moved in normal traffic patterns. It was as if the humans didn't know they were about to be attacked. Are they stupid? Ralthan wondered aloud. Broadcast our intentions. Offer them one last chance to surrender. The message went out. On Mars Nexus, people gathered in observation decks to watch. Children pressed their faces against the windows. Parents explained the tactical situation. Teachers pointed out the different ship classes. It looked less like an evacuation and more like a school field trip. Kim Sora, chief scientist of the terraforming division, stood in the observation deck with her grandson. "Watch carefully," she told him. "This is history. Grandma, why aren't we scared?" The boy asked. "Because we know something they don't," she replied with a smile. The Velthari fleet crossed into weapons range. Ralthan gave the order to fire. Plasma cannons charged. Missiles launched. A wave of destruction that could destroy a city headed toward Mars Nexus. Then something impossible happened. The weapons stopped. Not exploded. Not deflected. Stopped. They hung in space as if frozen in time, suspended by forces the Velthari couldn't detect. Then, slowly, they began to drift apart, breaking down into their component atoms and dispersing harmlessly into space. What just happened? Tarvik demanded over the communication channel. Unknown, Supreme Commander. Some kind of matter disintegration field. We've never seen technology like this. The Velthari fleet tried again. More weapons fire. The same result. Every missile, every plasma bolt, every energy beam simply dissolved before reaching the colony. On Mars Nexus, the crowd cheered. Children laughed and pointed. Someone started selling snacks. Then the real demonstration began. Space around the Velthari fleet began to ripple. Gravity wells appeared from nowhere, pulling ships out of formation. Dimensional shields flickered into existence, cutting through vessels like they were made of paper. Nanite swarms launched from hidden platforms, dismantling weapon systems with microscopic precision. The Velthari didn't even see where the attacks came from. One moment their fleet was intact. The next, 30% of their ships were disabled, dead in space, weapons offline, crews unharmed but completely helpless. Not a single human weapon had fired. Not one missile had launched. The battle was over in 6 minutes. Ralthan stared at his screens in disbelief. "Retreat," he whispered. Then louder, "Retreat! All ships, fall back." The remaining Velthari vessels fled in disorder. On Mars Nexus, the observation deck erupted in celebration. Governor Bejesu smiled and activated her communication system. This is Mars Nexus to Volthari Fleet. Your disabled ships will not be harmed. We will provide life support and medical assistance if needed. We suggest you reconsider your war plans. This was Lesson 1. The message was broadcast not just to the fleeing fleet, but across all of Volthari space. Billions of aliens who had never questioned their empire's superiority watched the footage. They saw their mighty fleet humiliated, without a shot being fired, and they began to wonder what else they didn't know about humans. Tarvek watched the footage of the Mars Nexus disaster for the 50th time. His war council sat in uncomfortable silence around him. 300 ships reduced to scattered debris and disabled hulks in 6 minutes. No visible weapons. No conventional attacks. Just technology that made their best warships look like toys. Explain this, he demanded. Someone explain how they did this. Nobody could. The Volthari Empire had conquered 500 species over 10,000 years. They had seen countless technologies, but nothing like this. Nothing that could simply make weapons cease to exist. Nothing that could disable a fleet without firing a shot. Supreme Commander, his science officer said hesitantly. We've analyzed the footage. The humans appear to have developed gravity manipulation on a scale we didn't think possible. They can create localized gravity wells, strong enough to trap ships. The matter disintegration appears to be advanced nanotechnology, billions of microscopic machines breaking down atomic bonds. We have nanotechnology, Tarvek said. Not like this. Our nanots work slowly, over hours or days. There's work in seconds. And the dimensional shields. The officer trailed off. We don't even have theories that could explain dimensional shields. They're cutting through space itself. Across human space, the celebration was more subdued than outsiders might expect. Humans didn't gloat over victory. They analyzed it. Every military academy was already reviewing the battle, finding mistakes, improving tactics. Victory was just another training exercise. Commander Yoon Hai-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Shadowfold. A ghost armada consisted of 50 ships, each one capable of something the Volthari had never imagined. They could phase between dimensions, appearing and disappearing at will. They could travel through space without using normal faster-than-light drives. They were the result of 3,000 years of human research into quantum mechanics and dimensional physics. Ma'am, we're receiving deployment orders, her first officer said. Hai-jin nodded. Where? The Volthari are massing their core fleet at the Nexus system. They're planning a major assault on our industrial colonies. How predictable, Hai-jin smiled. They still think like conquerors. They go after production centers and population hubs. They don't understand that we don't work that way anymore. Shin Minho, head of Psychological Warfare Division, sat in a small office that looked more like an artist's studio than a military installation. Screens covered the walls, showing feeds from across Volthari space. He watched the alien populations react to the Mars Nexus footage. Fear, confusion, but also something else. Questions. They're starting to doubt, he said to his assistant. Good. Doubt is the first crack in a dictatorship. Should we push harder? Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them question. Fear can break an enemy, but fear mixed with doubt can break an empire. The Volthari core fleet arrived at Nexus system with overwhelming force. 2,000 warships, the largest fleet assembled in 500 years. They expected fierce resistance. They expected a long, bloody battle. They expected to finally prove that the Volthari Empire was still the dominant power in the galaxy. The system appeared empty. The industrial platforms were there. Massive structures that processed materials from asteroid mining operations. But no defense fleet. No orbital weapons. Nothing. It's a trap, Ralthan said immediately. Obviously, Tarvik replied. But we can't back down now. The entire Empire is watching. Proceed carefully. Full shields. Weapons ready. The fleet advanced. Still nothing. They came within range of the industrial platforms. Still no response. Ralthan's instincts screamed at him that something was very wrong. Then space itself seemed to tear open. The Ghost Armada phased into normal space, appearing inside the Velthari formation. Not outside it where they could be tracked and targeted. Inside it. Ships materialized between Velthari vessels in positions that should have been impossible to reach without detection. All ships, evasive action. Tarvik shouted, but it was too late. Hyjin's fleet didn't use conventional weapons. They used dimensional cutters, beams that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. A Velthari ship could have every shield at maximum power, and it wouldn't matter. The dimensional cutters simply bypassed them, cutting through hulls like they weren't there. But the Ghost Armada didn't aim to kill. Every cut was precise, targeting weapon systems, engines, communication arrays. Within minutes, the massive Velthari fleet was crippled. Not destroyed. Disabled. 2,000 ships floating helplessly in space. Their crews alive, but their weapons offline. Then Shin Minho's broadcast began. It didn't go to military channels. It went everywhere. Every screen in Velthari space, from the homeworld to the smallest conquered colony. The footage showed the battle. Showed how easily the human ships had appeared and disappeared. Showed how helpless the mighty Velthari fleet had been. And then the message. This is humanity to all peoples of the Velthari Empire. We do not seek your destruction. We do not seek conquest. We seek only to defend ourselves. But we will defend ourselves completely. This is your second lesson. The reaction across the Empire was immediate. On conquered worlds, subject species watched and hoped. On Velthari worlds, citizens questioned. How could this be happening? How could primitives defeated them so easily? In secret communication channels, representatives from 15 different conquered species reached out to a human they had been speaking with for decades. Jiang Subin, human diplomat to subjugated peoples, received their messages with quiet satisfaction. We're ready, they told her. When you give the word, we will rise. We will fight alongside humanity for our freedom. Subin smiled. This was the real strategy. Humans didn't want to conquer the Velthari Empire. They wanted to free it. Every species trapped under Velthari rule deserved liberty. And humanity had been planning this liberation for centuries, quietly making contact, building trust, sharing technology. Soon, she told them. Very soon. On his flagship, surrounded by disabled ships and shattered pride, Tarvik finally understood. This wasn't a war between species. This was a revolution. And humanity wasn't the enemy. They were the spark that would burn down his empire. Kang Deho received the reports from both battles and nodded in satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. A plan that had been developed over 6,000 years, refined through billions of simulations, practiced by every human who had ever played a strategy game or studied military history. Park Minji, he said, send a message to the Velthari leadership. Tell them we're willing to negotiate, but not surrender. Never surrender. We negotiate as equals now. Park Minji drafted the message carefully. It was polite, respectful even, but firm. The message was clear. The age of the Velthari Empire was ending. The age of freedom was beginning, and humanity would see it through, no matter what it took. The Velthari home world had not seen a protest in 3,000 years. Their rule was absolute, enforced by fear and overwhelming military power. But on the day after the Nexus system defeat, something changed. Small groups gathered in public spaces. They held signs with questions written in glowing text. Where is our mighty fleet? Who are we really fighting? What else have they lied about? Tarvek watched the surveillance feeds with growing alarm. Dissent was spreading like a virus through his empire. Not just on conquered worlds where rebellion might be expected, but on Volthari worlds themselves. His own people were questioning him. Shut down the information networks, he ordered. Block all outside communications. But it was too late. Humans had been infiltrating Volthari information systems for decades. Every attempt to block communication channels found workarounds already in place. The truth kept spreading. Jiang Subin sat in a secure conference room, her image projected to 15 different locations across Volthari space. The faces looking back at her represented 15 conquered species, billions of beings who had lived under oppression for centuries or millennia. The time is now, she said simply. We've given you weapons. We've given you training. We've given you hope. Now we give you freedom. Rise up. Fight. We will support you. On the industrial world of Kethrin, the Keth people had labored in mines for 800 years, extracting precious metals for Volthari warships. They received the signal and acted immediately. Using weapons that had been smuggled in piece by piece over decades, they seized control of the planetary government in a single coordinated strike. The Volthari garrison never had a chance. On the agricultural world of Vaoran, the Vyar people stopped sending food shipments to Volthari military bases. Instead, they broadcast a simple message. We no longer serve oppressors. We are free. Across dozens of worlds, the pattern repeated. Species rising up, declaring independence, fighting back with human weapons and human training. The Volthari Empire, which had seemed so solid and eternal, began to crack apart. Choi Junho watched the strategic map in the command center with satisfaction. Red markers representing Volthari control flickered and changed to blue or green as worlds declared independence or requested human assistance. The Empire was fragmenting exactly as predicted. They're spreading their forces too thin, he explained to the junior officers who were learning from the campaign. Every rebellion needs troops to suppress it. Every supply line needs protection. They're fighting 200 separate wars now, and they don't have the resources for it. Admiral Kandeho's fleet moved through space with careful precision. They weren't invading Volthari territory. They were creating corridors, safe passages for refugees fleeing the chaos. Every human ship was equipped with supplies, medical facilities, and translators. They welcomed everyone who needed help, regardless of species. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from civilian transports in Sector 7, his communication officer reported. Volthari military is attacking refugee ships. Unacceptable, Deho replied coldly. Deploy the defense screen. Anyone who attacks refugees will be disabled and boarded. Non-lethal force only, but make sure they understand we won't tolerate attacks on civilians. The human response was swift and overwhelming. Volthari commanders who tried to attack fleeing refugees found their ships, suddenly surrounded by human vessels that appeared from nowhere. Weapons systems disabled. Crews detained but unharmed. The message was clear. Humanity would protect the innocent, even enemy civilians. Ralthan sat in his quarters, reviewing battle reports that made no sense from a military perspective. Humans had the power to destroy the Volthari fleet completely. He had seen their weapons. He knew their capabilities. They could crack planets if they wanted to. But they did single quotes T-dot. Every human attack targeted only military assets. Every human victory ended with offers of medical aid and safe passage. They weren't fighting a war of conquest. They were fighting a war of liberation. And it was more devastating than any conventional war could have been. They're not trying to beat us, he said to himself. They're trying to free us. On a small human research station, Lee Yuna compiled intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The picture was clear. The Velthari Empire was collapsing from within. Not because humanity had destroyed it, but because humanity had exposed it. Exposed its weaknesses, its cruelties, its fundamental injustice. How long until complete fragmentation? Her assistant asked. 3 months, Yuna replied. Maybe less. They've already lost effective control of 40% of their territory. The rebellions are spreading faster than they can respond. Han Taiyang initiated the next phase of the plan. Technology sharing. Human scientists began broadcasting instructions for building basic defensive shields, water purification systems, medical scanners. Free knowledge shared openly with any species that wanted it. The message was simple. Humanity didn't want to rule others. They wanted others to be able to rule themselves. On the Velthari homeworld, Tarvek faced his council. Half of them were missing, having fled or been arrested for conspiracy. The empire he had inherited from 1,000 generations was dying, and he couldn't stop it. We could negotiate, one advisor suggested carefully. The humans have offered talks. Negotiate what? Tarvik demanded. Our surrender? Our humiliation? Our survival, the advisor replied. Sir, we've lost. Not militarily. Perhaps we never even fought a real military campaign. We lost the moment we declared war. They were prepared for us. They had been preparing for 6,000 years. We walked into a trap of our own making. Park Minji received the message from Velthari High Command requesting formal negotiations. She read it carefully, noting the tone. Not defiant. Not proud. Desperate. They were finally understanding their situation. Approve the meeting, she told her staff. Neutral location. Full security. And make sure we bring the representatives from the liberated species. They deserve to be part of this. The meeting was set for 3 weeks later on a neutral space station in unclaimed territory. But in those 3 weeks, the empire continued to crumble. More worlds declared independence. More species joined the growing coalition of free peoples. More Velthari commanders surrendered, realizing they were fighting for a cause that was already lost. Bei Jisu, governor of Mars Nexus, received a strange message. It was from a Velthari civilian on one of their core worlds, sent through illegal channels at great personal risk. The message was simple. Thank you for showing us there was another way. We are trying to change things from within. Please be patient with us. She shared the message with her staff, feeling a mix of emotions. Satisfaction that the strategy was working. Sadness for the chaos and pain this transition was causing. Hope that something better would emerge from the ashes of the Empire. In simulation rooms across human space, people continued to play strategy games and run military exercises. But the scenarios were changing. Now they simulated peacekeeping operations, reconstruction efforts, diplomatic challenges. The war was ending. The real work of building a better galaxy was just beginning. Tarvak stood alone in his command chamber, watching his empire disappear from the map piece by piece. He had started this war believing in Velthari superiority. He was ending it understanding that superiority was an illusion. Humans hadn't beaten them with better weapons, though they had those. They had beaten them with better ideas, freedom, justice, cooperation, ideas that had grown in humanity during their 6,000 years of isolation. Ideas that were now spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. And Tarvak knew with absolute certainty that there was no putting out this fire. The age of empires was over. A new age was beginning. The neutral station hung in empty space between territories that no longer meant much. What had been Velthari Empire space was now a patchwork of independent worlds, newly freed species, and humanitarian zones. The war that was supposed to last years had ended in 6 months, not through destruction, but through dissolution. Park Minji, walked through the station corridors toward the negotiation chamber. Behind her came representatives from 20 different species, including 3 Velthari who had broken from their government and joined the liberation movement. Ahead, in the chamber, Tarvek waited with what remained of his authority. The meeting began with silence. 2 sides of a war that had never really been fought sitting across from each other. Finally, Tarvik spoke. "You've won," he said simply. "State your terms." Minji spread her hands, a human gesture of openness. "No terms. No conquest. No reparations. No executions or punishment. We're not here to dictate. We're here to propose." Tarvek's confusion was evident on his alien features. "I don't understand. You defeated us. You could demand anything." "We could," Minji agreed. "But what would that accomplish? More resentment? More oppression? More seeds for future wars? We didn't fight to replace your empire with ours. We fought to end the Age of Empires." She activated a holographic display showing her proposal. It was elegant in its simplicity. The Galactic Cooperative, a federation of free worlds where each species governed itself. Shared technology, shared resources, shared security. But no empire, no rulers, no conquered peoples. Every world gets one vote, she explained. Regardless of size or power, decisions are made collectively. Technology and knowledge are shared freely. Defense is cooperative. Any species can join by choice, and any species can leave the same way. "This is naive," one of Tarvek's remaining advisors said. "Someone will always seek power. Someone will always try to dominate." "Probably," Minji admitted. "That's why the cooperative includes mutual defense agreements and arbitration systems. But the foundation is different. It's not built on fear and force. It's built on mutual benefit and respect." Tarvek studied the proposal for a long time. "And what happens to the Velthari? Do we simply disappear? Do our worlds lose their voice because of what our government did?" "No," Li Yuna spoke up, sitting beside Minji. "Velthari worlds are invited to join as equals. Your people aren't your government. Many Velthari helped us during the war, secretly or openly. They deserve the same freedom as everyone else." The negotiations continued for 3 days. Point by point, they built the framework for something new. The former subject species were eager, seeing hope for the first time in generations. The Velthari representatives were cautious, but slowly accepting. And the humans facilitated, guided, but never demanded. On the final day, Tarvik asked the question that had been haunting him. He and Minji stood alone in an observation deck, watching stars through the viewport. "Why aren't you angry?" he asked. "We declared war on you. We planned to destroy your colonies. We would have killed billions if we could have. Why no revenge?" Minji was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. 6,000 years ago, you quarantined us. You meant it as a punishment, keeping us trapped and isolated. But you gave us something precious. You gave us time. Time to grow. Time to learn. Time to become better than we were. She turned to face him. Humans could have become conquerors too. We had the technology. We had the power. But we used that time to ask ourselves what kind of species we wanted to be. We decided we didn't want to repeat the same cycles of domination and violence that had defined our own early history. "So you're simply better than us?" There was no bitterness in Tarvek's voice, only curiosity. "No," Minji said firmly. "We're just humans who had 6,000 years to think about it. Your people can make the same choice. Any species can. That's what the cooperative is about. Giving everyone the chance to be better." The agreement was signed 3 weeks later in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. 50 species joined immediately. More would follow. The Galactic Cooperative was born, imperfect and uncertain, but full of hope. Han Taiyang led the technology-sharing initiative. Human scientists worked alongside alien researchers, teaching and learning. Terraforming techniques, medical technology, energy systems, all shared freely. The only requirement was that recipients also share their knowledge. This is how we grow stronger together, he explained to a mixed group of scientists from a dozen species. Not through conquest or theft, but through cooperation and exchange. Beijisu watched her colony on Mars Nexus transform again. Now it wasn't just a human settlement. Refugees from 30 different species had found homes there. Children of different species played together in parks. Markets sold food from 100 worlds. It was messy and chaotic and beautiful. On Sejun was young for a military officer, only 23 years old. He had fought in the war, part of the defense force that had disabled the Velthari fleet at Nexar. Now he had a new assignment. Ambassador to New Velthar, the reformed homeworld of the Velthari people. He arrived nervously, still wearing his uniform but without any weapons. The greeting party included Velthari of all ages, including one young alien about his age who stepped forward with a gesture of peace. "I am Keleth," the young Velthari said in carefully practiced human language. "I am assigned to help you understand our world. I hope we can be friends." Seijin smiled and returned the gesture. "I hope so too." Over the following months, they did become friends. Keleth showed Seijun the museums where Velthari history was being rewritten, honestly acknowledging both achievements and atrocities. Seijun shared human culture, the music and art and stories that had sustained humanity through 6,000 years of isolation. "Your people prepared for war but hoped for peace," Keleth observed one day. "That's why you won. You were ready for the worst but working toward the best." Time passed. The cooperative grew, not without problems. There were disputes and disagreements. Some species left, then later rejoined. Some worlds struggled with the transition to self-governance. Pirates and criminals took advantage of the chaos. But slowly, steadily, things improved. 50 years after the war, Admiral Kang Daeho, now very old, stood in the Cooperative Assembly Hall. Representatives from 300 species filled the chamber. They were debating resource allocation for a new exploration initiative. Voices were raised. Arguments were passionate. But everyone was heard. Everyone had a vote. Beside him stood Tarvek, also aged but still alive. The former Supreme Commander had become an advocate for the cooperative, using his experience to help other species transition from authoritarian rule to self-governance. "Do you ever regret it?" Daeho asked him. "Your empire. Your power. You gave it all up." Tarvek watched the chaotic democracy unfolding before them. "I regret what I was. I don't regret what I became. You humans taught the galaxy something important. Power isn't about domination. It's about enabling others." The session ended with a vote. The exploration initiative passed. Ships from 50 species would work together to explore unknown regions of space. Not to conquer, to discover, to learn, to make contact with any new species they found and offer them the same choice the cooperative offered everyone. Join us or don't. But no, you're not alone. On a human colony world, children of 3 different species sat in a classroom learning galactic history. Their teacher, a human named Park Minji's grandson, told them about the war that never really happened. About how humanity turned a declaration of war into a revolution for freedom. Were humans scared? One child asked, a small Velthari with curious eyes. The teacher smiled. Probably some were. But mostly they were ready. Because they had spent 6,000 years preparing not just for war, but for what came after. For peace. for cooperation, for a galaxy where everyone could be free. I want to be ready like that, the child said. Then learn, the teacher replied. Learn about others. Learn to see beyond differences. Learn that strength isn't about being stronger than others, but about making others stronger too. Far away, at the edge of explored space, sensors detected something new. A fleet approaching from unknown territory. Another alien civilization making contact. The cooperative assembly received the news and prepared a response. Not fear, not weapons. An invitation. Representatives from 100 species, including humans and Velthari working together, traveled to meet the newcomers. When the alien ships arrived, they were met with a simple message. We are the Galactic Cooperative. We welcome you in peace. We offer friendship, trade, and cooperation. But be warned, we protect our freedom and the freedom of all species. We have learned that the strongest power is the power shared by free peoples working together. Join us in building a better galaxy, or go your own way in peace. The choice is yours. The new aliens listened. They saw ships from hundreds of different species working in harmony. They saw worlds freed from oppression. They saw strength that came not from conquest, but from cooperation. And they chose to join. The galaxy would never be perfect. There would always be conflicts and challenges. But it would never again be a place where empires ruled unchallenged. Because humanity had shown that there was another way. Not through war, not through conquest,